Callan James. And if there's one thing I want to remember about him, it's just how peaceful he looked and the peace that he brought with him into the room.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us. We are just so excited. I am so excited to have ReAna here with me today.
Hi.
We're actually here in studio. It's our basement, everybody. So ReAna, thanks for coming up and being with me in person. It's a treat to actually meet people that have are in our same boat. So I'm so grateful that we got to meet today. Finally.
Yeah.
We've been chatting for some time now. So thank you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to share our story. And it's, I know that stillbirth happens to 1 in every 168 women. And so to actually meet someone who's been there and in person is just surreal.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure. And I was going to say, I was like, this is a treat. And I was like, no, it kind of stinks to actually know other people that have been in the same situation. But
Yeah.
it is really nice to meet you. So
Yeah. Nice to meet you too.
Okay, well, let's just jump in. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you guys? I'll just point out that they live in Utah like we do. And but then tell us a little bit about yourself and what your family looks like.
So my husband Kiffer and I, we live in Utah, and currently we have our daughter Hope, and Callan, and we have our cat Penny, and our boxer dog Gus, and he is crazy.
Oh man, he's a puppy too, right?
Yeah. He'll be 2 in August. And so he's my toddler right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
In puppy form. Yes.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
And at the time of Callan's birth, it was just you and your husband. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And tell me your husband's name again.
Oh, my husband's name is Kiffer.
Kiffer. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm saying it right too. So
That's okay.
Okay, great. And what do you guys do? Are you going to school, working? What do you guys do? And anything that you like to do in your spare time?
Yeah. So my husband is the Tractor Supply store manager.
Yeah.
And then I'm actually a virtual special education teacher. I teach ELA resource.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I work from home, and we're currently kind of wrapping up the year right now.
Yeah.
And
So just for the school district down there, or just all over all the districts?
all over Utah.
Really?
Yeah.
That is great. I had no idea there were virtual programs like that
Yeah.
helped.
So it's actually a virtual school. And it's
Mhm.
called Utah Virtual Academy.
Uh-huh.
And it's pretty great. I've been working there since October. Started working there shortly after my daughter was born. So
Yeah. Well,
good.
good. That's great.
Yeah.
And what other what extracurricular activities do you guys like to do in your spare time?
So, we're still kind of figuring out what that looks like as parents.
Right? It totally changes.
Yeah, so I'm actually in an orchestra. I'm in the Saratoga Springs Community Orchestra.
And you play?
I play the flute and
Woo!
the piccolo.
Yay! And the piccolo. Oh, God bless you.
Oh my goodness. No, I'm a total stereotypical flute.
That is hilarious.
The other night we had a rehearsal, and my section leader and I are just joking back and forth, and I don't know, it was a totally stereotypical flute moment. I'm such a nerd.
You don't So I am a band nerd too, ReAna. We talked about this just a second before, but I play the clarinet, but I totally get where you're coming from. Band nerds are like a different breed, right?
Yes. We stick together.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much.
We seem to find each other in a room. So.
Yeah. I think that's so great. I think so fun. So I didn't realize they even had an orchestra out there. That's great.
Yeah.
And do you play like quarterly concerts or a couple times a year?
Yeah, so we do, let's see, we just had our spring concert, and then we're going to be having an outdoor concert on June 5th. And then we're participating in a little parade.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to be playing like the Stars and Stripes Forever on the piccolo.
Oh, you guys, if you haven't heard the John Philip Sousa Stars and Stripes Forever, the piccolo part is the part. Like it's the part. Like I think it's the best. It's so pretty. I mean, and so fun and just like, yeah.
It is intimidating as all get out.
It's so fun though. I'm so excited for you.
Thanks. But it's pretty great. We have so we usually have like this is my first full year in it. So we have our spring concert, and then I guess we have something going in the summer, and then we have our winter concert.
Oh, good. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's pretty solid performances. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good.
It's fun.
Yeah. And I'm sure right now, being a new mom, essentially, because Hope is about 10 months old, right?
Yeah.
And so you guys are, it's always fun. Just like, you're like, oh, there's a park. We should go to the park. You know, like this, let's go to the zoo. Like things that you would never do when you didn't have a kid. I mean.
Exactly. Like I just introduced her to the swings a couple weeks ago. It's the cutest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And like, when you get older, you kind of forget like some of the little things in life that are just simple joys.
Yeah.
And you kind of forget them until you see your baby enjoying them. And then you're like, oh, this is the best thing in the world.
Yeah. And it costs nothing. It's great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
I'd love to start talking about Callan because he is the reason why we're here. And so you guys were had been married for a little while, or how long had you been married when you guys got pregnant?
When we got pregnant, we'd been married for about 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was about 4 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We were living in Washington State.
Okay.
And we'd actually been more or less trying for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
And I was starting to get a little worried because I hadn't gotten pregnant yet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually kind of funny when I found out I was pregnant with him.
Mm-hmm.
I found out I was pregnant with him on July 7th, 2020.
Okay.
I was part of another community orchestra that my director was a magician, and he found out how to help us get to perform from our own homes. And so
during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So it was awesome. And that night we were supposed to have a concert, and I had been like a little late at that point, but I really didn't think I was pregnant.
Okay.
I really didn't think I was pregnant. And I was so sure that I wasn't pregnant but I just wanted to like get it off my mind. I went upstairs and I took the test. And my husband had actually just gotten home. And so I'm just sitting there like, la la la, I'm going to jump on this concert here in 15 minutes. And then I look down and sure enough, there's a little blue cross. And it's like, oh my gosh, Kipper, get up here. And he's like, what's going on? And I'm like pointing this like stick that I just peed on in his face. And he's like, oh my gosh. And so then we cried and we like seriously stood there and for about 10 minutes. And I completely forgot about the concert.
You did?
I did. I'm so sorry.
Well, this is big news though. I mean, if you guys have been trying for 2.5 years, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And that night, instead of doing the concert, I didn't even think about it till later. We went and we got like food and I got something healthy, and because now it's like baby mode,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Totally.
And I got prenatal vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
And we just kind of started doing all this planning and talking about things and running around town, and it was great.
Oh, that is so fun. I
Yeah.
love the fact that you remember exactly the day because you
Yeah.
missed the concert.
Exactly. I'm so sorry, you guys. I still feel bad about that, like 3 years later.
That's so great. I love that. That
Yeah.
ties into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so you got pregnant during the pandemic. So just like I like to give everybody some context because that really probably played a lot into how your care looked. How did I mean that was pretty early on. So,
Yeah.
but I think they usually recommend between 9 to 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks is when you start checking in with your doctor. So, how
Mhm.
did care look up in the state of Washington when you started going in or maybe not going in?
I don't know, and maybe it's just because it was my first pregnancy,
Mhm.
but they were things I knew were restricted, like, I could only bring one guest,
Okay. So they
and
did at least let you have somebody there.
yeah.
Okay.
So they let me have, like, one person there, and, we had to wear masks, and, I remember when we would go in for my ultrasounds because we
Mhm.
did my ultrasounds through a third-party company,
Yes.
like, there were specific restrictions about how many people could be in the waiting room. So, like, my husband would have to wait down in the car until I was called in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But he would be able to go in with you.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good and nice. Because some people didn't have that at all. So,
Yeah. I mean, the restrictions really came into play a little bit more towards the end of my pregnancy, which I'll kind of like explain about.
Mhm.
But it was, I would say it was really something to get used to for
Mhm.
sure. Because where I was working, I was a nonprofit teacher at
Mhm.
the time, and like half my students were coming from home or
Mhm.
they were attending from home. Half my students came to school. And so I didn't actually like get to see a whole lot of people outside of the management team that I was on.
Oh, I see.
And so I feel like that kind of helped us become a little bit of a family,
Mhm.
for one. And for two, it was also, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's
But
totally fine. So you are this teacher where you get to see some kids, you're interacting with the people that are in your office, administrative folks, I guess. Yeah.
yeah,
And so you didn't see I'm assuming you saw some COVID restrictions because of the way the kids were coming in.
yeah.
And then having to go into the hospital with masks and one person visitor type situation. So,
Yeah. It was the big thing. Okay. So when I was towards the end of my pregnancy, because our son had a condition,
mhm.
and we'll talk about that, but we ended up going across the country to Florida to get him treatment. And I went twice by myself, just
Oh.
Callan and me. And being on the airplane was like I was 30 weeks pregnant when the first time I went.
Mhm.
And I had two planes that I went on that time around, just to get there. And it was the most uncomfortable experience.
I'm sure.
Like centralized air or whatever wasn't working. And so I was boiling as this like 30-week,
Oh, yeah.
pregnant mama. And, just in a in this jam-packed flight because it was actually the day after Christmas that I left.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so it was just you wouldn't think it, but it was jammed packed
Yeah.
and just no space for me and my ginormous belly.
Yeah. At 30 weeks? Oh, man,
Yeah.
that's crazy. So, at these I wanna go back to your first visits, though.
Mhm.
How did that look when you first checked in with your doctor? Did you have a primary care physician, or did you go to an OBGYN? Who'd you go to?
Yeah. So I went to an OB-GYN. It was like a group of OB-GYNs.
Okay.
And I remember going in for the first time. We went in around 9 weeks. Or no, sorry, 6 weeks. 8 weeks.
When was it? Well, it was a little while ago, so that's totally fine. So around 8 weeks. Yeah. And that's pretty typical.
Yeah. So we went in and they verified that I was indeed pregnant.
Okay.
Because that was the thing. I was like, I need to see this in writing.
Yeah. I need to see the lab work. I need to make sure everything looks fine. Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah. And so anyways, I went in and they verified that I was pregnant. And then they brought in we thought that we were going to be doing an ultrasound. And they hadn't planned on doing an ultrasound, but we'd been told that we might do one. So they're like, oh, it's okay. We can do one. So they brought in this like little portable ultrasound, and I got to see my little bean for the first time.
Because that's how big they are. They're just tiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so fun.
And then I went back in a couple weeks later and we got to see him again. And I just went like, I think about every 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
To get an ultrasound. We typically went to a third party company.
Right.
And then at 20 weeks, I went in, and I remember that ultrasound took a little longer than usual. And that's your 20 weeks is your big anatomy scan.
Exactly.
So they're looking at everything. And I remember the nurse, like the first thing that she said to us is, well, we can't tell you anything. We can't confirm whether or not they have something. And I remember thinking like, okay, that's weird, but that's probably just something that they say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it just so happened that my 20 weeks fell on the same week as my birthday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I decided to make that week like, it was going to be my birthday gift to myself. I was going to get to see my baby on that Monday, and then the next day was my birthday, and then like a couple days later I had my follow-up appointment.
Yeah, from that. Okay.
Yeah. And so I went in on Monday, had my ultrasound. Tuesday was my birthday. Then Wednesday I got a call. And
wait, so at the 20-week ultrasound, like the Monday when you had it, because they usually kind of do a tour. Like, I know that sounds funny, but they do it. Okay, here's his head, or here's the head, here's the heart, did they do something kind of like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So did you notice anything? I know those ultrasound, like what you see is really like, what is that? It looks like a big blob of something. I don't know what that is. Did you notice anything different, or besides the fact it took longer?
Not really.
Okay.
I didn't really know what I was looking at.
Right. Okay.
I do remember at one point, like, and I'll be honest, I can't remember if this is like in my head or not, but I do remember at one point looking and being like, oh, is that intestine? And then being like, yeah, that is, because our son had CDH. And I'm like, oh, is that intestine? Yeah, that is. And maybe thinking, well, that's weird that it's up that high.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, congenital diaphragmatic hernia, or CDH, is where there's a hole in the diaphragm. And the abdominal organs migrate into the chest and they start developing there. And it displaces the heart and the lungs. So in our son's case, he had what's called a left-sided hernia.
Okay.
And so his stomach, intestine, spleen, and later we found out like a sliver of liver had migrated into his chest.
Okay.
And started developing there. And it pushed his heart and his lungs to the right. And we found this out towards the end of our pregnancy, but there's like a bunch of ratios and numbers and stuff that go into it, most of which I don't remember anymore. But, whereas a typically developing baby would have, like 100 for, their lung capacity or so.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Our sons were 26 and 28.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and he was actually given a pretty good prognosis.
Even with those numbers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just for everybody, and actually, I know a little bit about this because we have some friends that had a son that had this. And tell us a little bit how that looks for progression of how this baby progresses if they have CDH when you find out at the 20-week anatomy scan.
Yeah. So we found out, I got the phone call from my doctor, and then we went in, and I guess as far as progression goes, the baby grows.
Mm-hmm.
And so like some of these numbers change.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, when we first went in, we were given an LHR which is lung head ratio of 1.02, which is like right on the cusp of what a lot of doctors would say is severe.
Mm.
So like severe is an LHR of 1.0 and below.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And so he was like right on the cusp, but that changes.
Because he is getting bigger, his chest cavity is getting bigger, and but also his organs are probably getting larger as well. So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then do organs go back through the hernia hole, or because I think, if I'm not mistaken, that if a baby is born and survives the birth, then there's a lot of it takes some time for lungs to develop and that type of thing. So can you expound a little bit more about how what maybe the doctors told you about what things would look like?
To answer the first part, yes, organs can move.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as what we were told to expect, it actually kind of changed. So we met, first off, my OB-GYN that I met with
Mm-hmm.
was like, I haven't seen a CDH baby in 5 years. He's like, you don't want to go with me. I haven't seen a CDH baby in 5 years. And that last family didn't even go with me. They went with this doctor out in Florida, Dr. Case.
A specialist. Yep.
Yeah. He's like, you need to go to Florida. He's like, you got to follow the data. You got to follow the data. He's got a 90% success rate. You got to go to Florida. And my husband and I are just looking at each other like, what?
You're like, I'm going to be going from basically across the country from the farthest okay, not
Yeah.
exactly the farthest to the farthest, but pretty
Yeah.
across our little country here.
Yeah. And we're like, that's what you do if you have a lot of money. Like,
Yeah.
we're not set like that. So we decided to look a little deeper into our regional hospital,
Okay.
Seattle Children's. And what we were told to expect was that it kind of changed a couple times. First, they said like 3 to 6 months in the hospital after birth, and then 4 to 6 months. And they'd said that, kind of advised us that CDH babies sometimes need to be resuscitated at birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on whether or not they need ECMO,
Yes.
they get their surgery, and they go in and they repair the hole, they move everything back to where it needs to be. And then there might be some subsequent surgeries to help with like, getting a feeding tube in. And then because baby has had a feeding tube in, subsequent surgeries to get, to help with acid reflux.
Right.
And then to expect to have to, be working with the pulmonologist and, all of these feeding specialists and doctors and stuff. And, while we were talking to this hospital, we were also talking to other families in Washington who had CDH babies.
Okay.
And actually a founder of Tiny Hero organization,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of getting information from them. And they were saying, you want to go to Dr. K's?
Everybody
Was saying like, go to Dr. K's out in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. And they gave us, when you have a CDH baby,
Mm-hmm.
there's a few things that you want to keep in mind. There's, proximity to a NICU immediately after birth.
Right.
So in our case, if we had decided to stay with Seattle, I would have had to deliver at UW, and then our baby would be transported to Seattle Children's, which is about 2 miles away.
Oh.
And so if you think about it, like CDH babies aren't more often than not, significantly, they're not able to breathe on their own
Mm-hmm.
at birth. So they have to be ventilated the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they have to be transported if they haven't been like resuscitated already. So it's kind of a precarious situation.
Yes, very shortly after birth. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's also like ECMO and whether or not, how many times they're willing to put baby on ECMO and whether or not the surgeon is willing to operate while on ECMO.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also just like an issue of how many cooks are there in the kitchen.
Yes, that's that's a great concern, actually.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, my husband and I are just taking all of this information in. And we'd finally met with a doctor, and we just, I don't.
At Seattle, or did you end up going to? So, which doctor are you referring to that you met with?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're totally fine.
We did decide to meet with the doctor in Seattle. We met with a little team. And after meeting with them and kind of going over the information that we'd gathered,
Mhm.
we didn't feel comfortable staying with Seattle Children's.
Okay.
And we were like, if we're not going to go to our regional hospital,
Mhm.
we're going to go to the best.
Okay.
And so we looked up a little bit more information on Johns Hopkins All Children's out in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay.
And we, in more information, we found that it was in our network. And
Oh,
yeah.
whoa, that is great. A miracle. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And so then it was just kind of like crazy because we're like, are we going to move? Like,
Mhm.
how are we going to make this work? The thing with meeting with the doctor that we'd wanted now was he had a bit of a list, a bit of a waiting list
Oh.
in order to see him. So I wasn't actually able to see him until just after Christmas,
Mhm.
And when you're a parent with a baby that has this kind of condition, you want to move on things as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
Do as much as you can.
Yeah.
Get as much information. Yes, that's exactly how I do it too. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, but you had to wait because and you said that was kind of around 30 weeks.
Yes. So I finally got to meet with him around 30 weeks. And I left for Florida the day after Christmas, and I met with Dr. Kays and the team. They did a fetal echocardiogram and an MRI and an ultrasound. And we got to meet with him, and he gave us some good news that
Oh.
we were hoping for. He's like, so your baby sorry, I'm trying to think of what he said. These things get a little blurry.
Oh, totally. I mean, it was like, what, 3 years ago? Yeah, totally. I get it.
Yeah. But he's like, so your baby has a 90 to 95% chance of survival.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah. He said, I don't feel comfortable saying 95, but 90 to 95% chance.
Just how he's looking.
Yeah, just how he's looking. And he said that there was an 85% chance that he wouldn't need ECMO. They said that it would be likely when our son was born that he would, instead of needing to operate within the first day or two,
Mhm.
it was more likely that they would operate, a week after he was born.
Yeah.
Because his lungs could support themselves a little better.
Right.
And they said that we could expect to be in the hospital for about a month and a half to 3 months.
That sounds way better than the 4 to 6 months or whatever you were given earlier.
Yeah.
And not being on ECMO too. So can you describe what ECMO is or what they told you that entailed? Because it's pretty intense.
Yeah. So from what I understand, and I'm not a doctor, so I can only explain as best as I know how. But what they go in is they go in, they tie off the jugular, and then they feed cannulas into your artery. And what those cannulas do is they essentially filter the blood. They take out some of the red blood cells, and then they push oxygen into the blood, and they have to like find the right levels and stuff. And then what that does is it kind of takes a little bit of strain off the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're looking for is to give the lungs just enough support to where they can breathe as much as they can on their own.
Right. But not being super overloaded by, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of, the way that I like thought of it is it's kind of like a spotter at a gym. You know what I mean?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you have it there as you need it, and so they can help you like get your arms up and make
Mhm.
sure that you're not falling and
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah.
it's not quite like that, but that's just how my brain.
Yeah. It has helped you understand that. It is, but it is also very intense. Like it's a, as you can imagine, just like, it's just very intense. It's very intensive. It's invasive, and it's hard on the body too. So
Yeah, they have to put you on blood thinners, which is why a lot of doctors don't like, especially on children.
to do surgery.
Yeah.
After that, because then the risk of bleeding. I mean, there's a lot of things that are very much involved in making those decisions. So
Yeah.
okay, thank you so much for. I'm sure some people were wondering what that was. So and it's not really, it's an abbreviation. It's just ECMO, if I'm not mistaken, ECMO, and that's how
Yeah.
people say it. So
Yeah.
okay, thank you so much. Were you feeling pretty sick in the first trimester? I just wondering how you're feeling during this time. I mean,
There were a few weeks that were pretty rough.
uh-huh.
I found that the worst thing for me was I would get vertigo really bad,
Oh,
like just super dizzy. And I remember this one time I thought it was because I had like crystals in my ears, you know what I mean?
mhm.
And so I remember this one time I was trying to do this maneuver to get to move it, and it must have been too much because I ended up throwing up so hard.
Oh,
I got
no.
like an almond lodged in my nose, and it was the worst.
Whoa, whoa, that was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And so I dealt a lot with like vertigo. That's actually what made me sick. And then it was looking for a little while like I might have to go on an IV, but things corrected themselves pretty
Okay.
quickly. So
Okay,
yeah.
that's good. Can you tell me at that the 20-week ultrasound, but you can usually find out if you're having a boy or girl, the gender of your baby. Did you guys find out then? Did you want to find out?
Yeah. And so we had our gender reveal out in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually after we got our diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
But we
And did you do it here in Utah because you have family here, or why did you guys come down here particularly?
oh yeah, my husband's family
Is all here? Okay.
Yeah. And so we came out here to Utah, and we met at my sister-in-law's house, and she did this whole like, because it was October, so we did a smoke and a pumpkin, and
Oh.
the smoke turned pink.
Oh.
And so
Oh, wait a second.
yeah. And so anyways, we were like, oh sweet, we're having a girl. But so previously you and I kind of talked about how Callan got his name.
Mm-hmm.
So originally we were going to name him Signe Ray. Signe is actually a Danish name and it means newly victorious.
Yeah.
But we'd also found Callan. My husband found Callan, and Callan is the Scottish name for rock.
Mm.
And I remember when the pink smoke came out of that pumpkin, I remember being just a little disappointed.
Yeah.
And being like, I don't know, this is great. I love this name, but something doesn't feel right. And then, a few weeks later, I went in for my first MRI.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, oh, yep, that's a penis. And so it's a boy.
That I've never. So I've heard of those happening where you're just like they get the gender mistake. I mean they get it wrong, and I was like, I would be so surprised. I would be like, what? Wait, I was planning on this, and now it's okay. I would be. So were you guys like super? Like, were you kind of relieved because it sounded like you had a little bit of like, oh wait.
Yeah, it felt right. Like it felt right. When my husband first pitched the idea of Callan, I fell in love with the name like immediately, what it meant. Um, I loved the idea of having a strong name for our strong little boy. And so I was really kind of bummed not super bummed. I was really happy to be having our little one, but I was just the littlest bit disappointed. And then when, I go in to review the results of my MRI, and my OB-GYN just starts asking me like 20 different questions and stuff like about my gender reveal and how we found out that Callan was a girl and all this stuff. And I just asked her, I'm like, is everything okay? Like, is there something wrong with my baby's genitalia? Like, what? Because at this point, I'm like, what else is new?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. That would make me so worried. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And she was like, no, it looks like your little girl is actually a little boy. And I was like, oh, that's it? Oh, I don't care. That's great.
Oh, man. Yeah. You're like, okay, good. Nothing's wrong. Just, we got a mistake in the first one. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you end up telling your family and everything too after that?
Yeah, we did. I kind of kept it off social media until I could get a more decisive, ultrasound.
Yes.
But it was just kind of a thing after that. I didn't really care whether or not it was a boy or a girl, but it was just like the one thing that I felt like I could kind of control a little bit and just wanted to stay consistent, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, it was, but honestly, when we found out that he was a boy, it was just like, there's a relief.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm good, Mom.
Oh, I love that so much. And how did you guys decide on James, the middle name?
So it actually took us a while to decide on that. I always wanted James because that's my husband's middle name.
Mm-hmm.
But my husband went through he's like, I don't want to give him my middle name. He's like, let's do something else. And he starts pitching Daniel. I'm like, no, we can't do Daniel because it'll be Callan, Daniel, CDH. We can't do that, and just pitching all these ones. And he ended up he surprised me when James or Callan was born because we gave him a baby blessing and he used his middle name.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah.
Okay. I like family names, so I think that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you are going along and it sounds like you're at these now that Callan has this diagnosis of CDH, then you're getting MRIs and you're getting ultrasounds and you're probably seeing your local doc often.
Yeah.
Pretty often. And then when you finally get out to Florida to see Dr. Case, then that's another. I was like, this is a lot of visits. This is a lot of visits, it feels like to me.
Yeah. I had I think I counted once and I had something met with 32 appointments. Some of them were all on the same day, but that was just in my second half of my.
Oh my goodness, that is crazy.
My pregnancy, yeah.
It's like a full-time job.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were gone some of those days. So you're still living, okay, let me just make sure I've got this correct. You're still living in Washington.
Yes.
And when you are finally able to get on you come up on the waiting list and you're able to go to Florida. So you traveled to Florida twice.
Yes.
And so the first one was you got good news that things were going well. You only went yourself.
Yes.
Kiefer was not able to come with you.
No.
Oh.
No. He works in retail.
Okay. And that is a very popular day after Christmas. So yes, I suspect they're like, nope, you're.
Yeah. And just with the pandemic, there were times, especially towards the beginning, but at that time he was working 60, sometimes 70 hours a week.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. So it was just me and Callan.
Okay.
We left for the first time the day after Christmas. And we got back. I came back January 1st, so New Year's Day.
Okay.
And things were a little bit more put together, so we started making more solid plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I left for what we thought was going to be the long haul. January 29th. And I was in quarantine in a hotel for a week. And then I moved into the Ronald McDonald House, and Kiffer flew out on February 9th. And then February 14th is when we lost him. And so Kiffer was still in quarantine. I'd actually gone, and I'm sorry if I'm like jumping the gun a little bit.
Nope, you're totally fine.
Yeah, but so I'd fallen asleep watching How I Met Your Mother on February 13th, and I woke up at like 1 a.m. and Callan was still kicking. And, I had like some cheese and crackers, and then I went back to sleep, and I woke up at like 6:15 the next day. On February 14th, he wasn't moving anymore. And so,
Did you feel like something was wrong? Or does he usually like move a lot in the morning kind of a thing?
Yeah. So I was what's called polyhydramnios, which meant that, because of his condition, there was a lot more amniotic fluid. And so he was always moving. And so when he wasn't moving, 'cause he always got up with me, I was like, oh, that's weird. So I remember going and I kind of walked around a little bit, trying to like get him moving. And then I had, like a muffin that still wasn't working. And yeah, I remember laying there for a little bit and being like, kind of praying to myself and saying like, please, Heavenly Father, like, I need to know that my baby is okay. Like, just please give me like a little kick, something, so that I know. And there was nothing. So finally, around, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning, I decided to walk down to the hospital. I remember getting there and having to fill out all this paper, and I had to fill out all this paperwork twice because I had to fill it out for me and I had to fill it out for Callan.
Yeah.
And I went in and they did a sonogram and he wasn't moving, or they couldn't find a heartbeat. And then I remember being like, "Oh, that's not as big of a deal. Like, he did this once when I was 15 weeks pregnant with him. They couldn't find a heartbeat then either." And so, it's probably something like that. And I was just joking around with the nurse, and her name's actually Callie.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, I love her, by the way. I don't know if she's ever going to see this, but really appreciate her. But yeah. So, she's like, "Let's get an ultrasound in here." And they did the ultrasound, and I remember the OB-GYN said, "I'm the resident OB-GYN at this time, and I'm so sorry, but it's my professional opinion that he's gone." And I remember being like, I didn't want to believe it. And I remember being like, I'm sure you're really good at your job, but I just came all this way from Washington for the CDH program. Is there any way I could get somebody in that program to take a look? And he said, yes. And they came. I forget her name, but she said the most beautiful things to me, and just kept talking to me for a few minutes. She's just looking at me because I'm laying down at this point. I'm laying down at this point, and she's just saying these things about how I'm so strong and all this stuff. And finally at the end, I was like, "So is he dead?" And she said, "Yes." Um, it's, the most surreal thing. I remember going in there with so much hope, and then seeing the ultrasound. And usually, when they do an ultrasound, they turn the red and blue on, right? And you can see the red and blue kind of lighting up the screen. And there was nothing. It was just gray. And I remember having to like crane my neck over my belly because it was ginormous. I was 37 weeks pregnant at this point, and I could see something was wrong. And then just like looking back at the ceiling tiles and trying to like find patterns in the ceiling and take in just everything I just heard. I called my husband. The second phone call I had to make to tell him bad news. um, I just apologized. I'm so sorry. So sorry. So they allowed him to break quarantine and be with me. He was quarantining with his. She lives in. She lives about 45 minutes from St. Petersburg.
Okay.
And so she brought him up, and he and I planned to go back to Indian Shores and grab his stuff from where he was staying. And we got the okay for him to stay with me in the Ronald McDonald house. And we decided that I was going to be induced that night.
That night.
Yeah. And so I remember we stopped. We ate at this little Polynesian restaurant that's not far from where she was living. And I remember that's when it hit me. Like, what no one tells you about stillbirth is you still have to have that baby, you know? There's no getting out of it.
No, it's
Yeah.
awful. For
Yeah.
37 weeks, you have to birth that baby.
Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is my first pregnancy. And it's not like, they can just rub my belly and this goes away. Like, this baby is coming out somehow. And, normally when you have a baby, like, you kind of have this hope. I mean, granted, ours was what we'd pictured was a little different because of our situation. Yeah. But you kind of have this hope that you're going to have a baby on the other end.
Yeah.
You know,
Going through all of that so that you can hold your baby. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it was just, realizing like, oh, not only so everything shifted again. We'd spent like the latter half of my pregnancy trying to get into this mindset of, our baby's going to have is going to need all of these surgeries. He's going to be in the NICU. We might not even be able to hold him when he's born, and like all of these things, just trying to gear up from that, moving across the country or relocating across the country. And then it's gone. It's gone. Why? So anyways, we checked into the hospital around 5:15 that night, and they induced me around 11.
You weren't at all like, were you dilated at all or anything? No contractions, nothing, right?
No, nothing out of the normal. Like, you get Braxton Hicks.
Yeah.
But
nothing,
yeah,
really.
Nothing.
Okay. So you were starting from the beginning in a sense.
Yeah. They gave me this pill. I think it's called like Cytocan or something.
Probably side attack or
Side attack. Yeah. To put under my tongue. And I remember I took it, and then the nurses left, and my husband and I, we watched Avatar for a little bit.
Right?
And we started watching WandaVision,
Uh-huh.
which that kind of became like the series that I like binge watched during this whole, you know, binge watched afterwards, because it's such a good series on grief. Like,
it is. I'm so glad you said that, because it really, really is. Like, if you haven't watched it, people, it is so good. I
Yeah.
totally agree, because it's all about grief and all the stages of grief.
Yeah, it was awesome. Just not for that night. We got to like the third episode where she's having the twins, and we're like, okay, we need to turn this off. And we put Avatar back on again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, anyways, my husband and I, we were exhausted. I was exhausted because
Yeah.
I'd been up all day, and, I didn't want to be in the hospital bed all night. So, or, I knew I was going to be in the hospital bed. So I didn't want to be in that bed as long as I could.
Right.
So my husband and I, you know, our little couch pulled out into a bed, and it's one of those like plastic,
Yeah.
Yeah. One
Not
of those.
super comfortable.
No.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine, I'm like, my husband's fallen asleep, and I'm 37 weeks pregnant on this like plastic bed, like trying to get comfortable, and like can't make it work.
Yep.
And I don't know, I kind of had a bit of a spiritual experience. Can I share that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please do.
Cool. But it was about 1:30 in the morning, and I was finally starting to fall asleep. I was kind of somewhere in between. And I remember just, my husband was asleep, and it was kind of the first like little bit in a while that I'd had to myself. And I remember kind of praying and being like, "Dear God, what?" Like, I don't even know what to say to you right now. I have never been so angry with anyone in my life. And just like, I don't know what to say, so I'm just gonna kind of let these images come in my mind. I'm gonna let my heart do the talking, and you're gonna need to be okay with that. um, and I just like, I kind of took it through everything that I'd seen, what it was like to get the phone call about Callan's CDH, being in quarantine, learning about, the death of my son, like all of these things just kind of coming together, and just thinking about these, and all of a sudden, like kind of in the middle of all these images like coming to my mind, I started to like form this picture in my head. And this picture just became clearer and clearer and clearer. And there was this young man, and he looked like a combination of my husband and my father. He was a redhead, like my husband. And he just became clearer and clearer and clearer. And then I could almost see him doing these things. And he put one hand on my forehead, and the other, he just took my hand in his. He called me his angel mother. He said, "Mom, I love you. I thank you for everything that you were willing to do for me." He said, "I couldn't have come to anyone else. I am the best parts of you and Dad. And just thank you. And God thanks you too." And then he said, "Don't be afraid. I'm going to be there the whole time." And shortly after that, he just kind of stayed with me for a little while, and then I kind of woke up once I realized kind of what was happening. And I reached over to Kiffer and I was like, Callan's here. And then within like a half hour, the real contractions started. Yeah. And that whole day was just like, that whole day was surreal, but it had like the most peace. There was just this like immutable peace in my hospital room that I didn't want to provoke it. You know what I mean? And it was almost like I mean, of course we would cry. It was a very like, a sad day, of course. But it was just like at the same time there was just this peace that was there. And it's like if I tried to poke it with a stick, I couldn't. It was immutable. And I remember that day like just trying to be extra nice to the nurses, and it was physically grueling.
Mm-hmm.
But at 6:34 p.m. I delivered my son, Callan James. Beautiful.
Oh,
Sorry, I feel like I just talked for a long time.
that's what we need to do when we tell our kids' stories.
Yeah.
He was born on February 15th, right?
Yes.
How you had been, that was a long day, long few days, couple days since you found out, huh?
Yeah.
And then you labored probably from early morning till 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember they came in at so it's funny because they came in, and they put me on Pitocin and my epidural around 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And by noon, I was at a 9. And by 11, I was at a 9.
Uh-huh.
They're like, okay, we're going to deliver this baby by noon. And my husband and I are like, okay, that's good. Because we were just praying that I wouldn't have to labor for long.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I stayed there at a 9.
At a 9 for 7 more hours.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. I just stayed there. And they would come back in, and I think I finally got to a 9.75, and I stayed there for a few hours too. And, when they came in at 5 p.m., they're like, okay, you're ready to go now. And my husband and I are just like, okay, we need a minute. Need to gear up.
Yeah, you do, because you're going to meet your son, and that is, it's the start of another step, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they gave us about a half hour, and we started pushing at 5:30. And I remember trying to keep the mood light. They're asking me, so how did you get your son's name? What does Callan mean? And I'm like, oh, his name is Callan. Hey, have you heard of Avatar: Last Airbender? Oh, push. Yeah, so there's this character called the Rock, or the Boulder. So we have push. We call him Callan the Boulder.
That is so funny.
Yeah. And there was it was all fun and games until I started crowning, and then it was just like, okay, it's go time.
It's go time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, just before he was born, my OB-GYN, and I'm sorry if this is TMI, but he got stuck on my pelvis.
Okay.
And so she was trying to maneuver him
to kind
out.
of, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she was wrist deep inside of me. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And had been like that. And she's like, I think we need to do an episiotomy. And I'm like, no, just give me a minute. Just get out and give me a minute. And she's like,
get out
okay.
for a second.
Literally, I just need a minute. And
oh man.
So she did. And then I pushed him out on the next contraction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Phew.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Also having, like, let's have a tear or like a cut that you're
No
gonna have
way.
to heal from too. Just that's another thing.
Yeah. It was funny. Well, okay, it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. But I had very minimal tearing.
Yeah.
So it was a relief.
Yeah. That is nice.
Yeah.
So he was born, and then did you guys have any discussions with the nursing staff about how you wanted how it was gonna look after he was born? Like, did you want skin to skin? Did you want to wa- did you want to wash him? Did Kiffer cut the umbilical cord? Like, tell me what your plans or preferences were after he was born.
Yeah. So Kipper cut the umbilical
He did?
cord.
Okay.
They gave us the option of whether we wanted to like clean him ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um and if we wanted him like dressed and stuff. I think we decided I don't think we did skin to skin. I think we had them wash him and clothe him pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember. I just remember looking at him. He was just the most perfect little baby I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
you know, um, yeah. So Kipper cut the cord. They washed him, and it was really quiet. It was really quiet. And think the whole day I'd been hoping just a little bit. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I was hoping just a little bit that maybe his heart rate was just really, really low. You know, um, but it wasn't. He was gone. And I remember when they handed him to me, it was the most surreal thing because you spend 9 months dreaming about like what your baby looks like,
Yeah.
you know, and wondering like, is he going to look more like my husband or is he going to look more like me? And then all of a sudden they're on the outside
Mm-hmm.
and I'm getting to like see his fingers and, like his cheeks. He had the chubbiest cheeks.
Oh.
And, seeing that, yeah, I can definitely see my dad in him. And, he was a redhead. And so I'm like, okay, things are looking pretty good about last night. you
Yeah.
know? Um, no, he was beautiful. And we have pictures of him, but they don't do him any justice.
I know. I agree. It's kind of like, oh man, I wish you could all meet him. You feel
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah. And I just remember there was this peace, like just this peace. I I didn't get to meet my son like in the same way that, you know, you get to meet your children, the same way I got to meet my daughter.
Mm.
But I know what he feels like, you know. My son he's got like he's compassionate, but he's strong. And he's got this like really almost like strong silent type
Mm.
feel to
Mhm.
him, but also just like this goodness. Like my husband is just this good person.
Yeah.
You take that goodness and you multiply it. And that's my son,
Oh.
you know? And he was there and he fulfilled his promise. He was there the whole time. And he's still with us now. So he's
He's great. Yeah. I think that's so yeah, the way you talk about him and he it feels like he's a very much part of your daily life.
Oh yeah. I have this saying that those that love us who leave us a little too soon, they're in every detail of our lives. I look back on the whole experience with Callan, like my
Mhm.
whole pregnancy, and it's got his name and my mom's name written all over it.
Mm.
You know, my my mom passed away when I was 15, and I look at the experiences that I had, the people that were in my life, the place where I worked, my boss reminded me a lot of my mom.
Really?
And yeah, this is my first pregnancy, and the whole demographic was women who had children. They were great moms.
Yeah.
They'd been through this, you know what I mean? And so they were there with me the whole time. And, just to see the amount of support that we got from people. I mean, yes, it was a very harrowing situation to be in. But if you look at the support that we got, you look at the people that were in our lives that just blessed us in innumerable ways. I'm like, that's got my mom written all over it. She's like, I can't be there physically to help her out through this thing. So, and even if I could be, I wouldn't be able to because of the pandemic.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but he's like, I wouldn't be able to because of the pandemic, but there's no way I'm leaving my baby alone.
Yeah.
And with Callan, I'm sure he was just kind of in there as well. It's funny how many people I've met now that have experienced child loss or stillbirth or miscarriage. And, this is one of the first times I've actually met someone in person.
Yeah.
But the amount of people that reached out to me or that it's just like, hey, I went through something similar. It's incredible. And so I believe it 100%. They're in the little details of our lives. And I guess the way I look at it, and sorry if I'm totally veering off topic,
No,
but
you're not.
but my daughter, Hope, has an extra set of eyes on her.
Yeah. Yes. I believe that too. I think the same thing about our son and him watching our kids.
Yeah.
I totally think so. Yeah. He's nearby, just like Callan is with you guys and with Hope. And I love to think about, so we had Felix after we had our son Brandon, who was stillborn. And I just how cool it is, because I am Christian as well, and I believe that they probably knew each other before Felix came down here.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me happy to think that they got some brotherly time.
Me too.
Sibling time before Felix came down here. So
yeah. Oh, 100%. He's like, hey, wouldn't it be so cool if our moms got to know each other?
oh yeah, basically. I just think it's fun to think about how we're all kind of connected in a little way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, so you guys got to spend did you get to spend a bit of time with him after he was born?
Yeah. We got to spend a few hours with him.
Okay.
We got to hold him.
Yeah.
And
How big was he, by the way?
he was 6 pounds, 8 ounces.
Oh, so he was a good little size.
Yeah. He was little and he was pretty tall.
Oh, really? Just super long then.
Yeah, he was pretty tall. He had big feet.
Did he? Did he?
Yeah. They were really certifiably long. I mean, we were kind of joking around how he would probably be a swimmer.
Yeah, totally.
He's got these big old fins for feet.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. And we just kind of held him, and it's interesting when your child is born, you just want to tell them everything. You just want to tell them that it's going to be okay, and that you're going to be there for them, that you love them, and that you're going to do your best to parent them, and you apologize for any mistakes you're going to make in the future.
Right.
But you're asking, you're saying, I'm going to do my best, and you're pledging your life to them. And we did that with Callan. It looked a little different, but it's just I'm going to get there. I love you, and it's not your fault, and we're not mad at you, and it's okay. It's okay. And we know you're going to be here with us, and just telling him how much we love him. It's we love you so, so much. And just kind of saying the same things over and over again, just holding him and marveling over this baby,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and just being like, this is my perfect little baby.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he was just beautiful. And I remember they're like, you can keep him in here as long as you like. And we kept him with us for about 3 hours. But then there's kind of this part, and I experienced this with my mom too when she died. It was like there's this part of you that, and I hope this isn't weird to say, but it's like I need to I need to let you go. Like I have to get started living life or learning how to live life without you.
Yeah.
You know? And it wasn't at all that I wanted him to go away.
No, not at all.
No. It was just like I need we need to start. And so remember when they wheeled him out of the room? It was like a part of me left with him. And the next time I saw my son, we were at the funeral home, and they were handing him to me in a little yellow tote bag.
Uh,
I remember holding him. I took the little box out of the bag and I just held him against my belly. It was still swollen. And I just remember like just wanting to absorb him back into me and feeling so helpless because like, and it was really hard to feel like I had
yeah.
failed.
It's like the worst feeling.
Yeah. That some people might say that, the day I gave birth to Callan was the worst moment of my life. No. Like, no.
Yeah.
The the worst moment of my life was holding my son. Um, but yeah, so the night that they took Callan out of the room and Kiffer and I ate, hadn't really eaten,
Yeah.
and then we fell asleep. And the next morning, um, Dr. Case came to visit us. He called and had asked if he could come, and we said yes. I remember going and like taking a shower and, trying to get ready because I'd been gross after like
In 2 days, you were just like crying and yeah. What do you expect? Yeah.
yeah. And I remember coming out of the bathroom like clothed and stuff, and Dr. Case came in the room. And I remember being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't have my mask on." And he gave me a big hug. He's like, "I'm so sorry." And he, I was not expecting it. I was not expecting that. It was kind of like, almost like a scene in a movie where you're like, "I'm so sorry. I don't have my mask
Yeah.
on. Like, it
He's
doesn't
like,
matter."
it doesn't
Come
matter.
here.
Yeah.
But then can I just say something?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. So I really want to like express my love and gratitude to the staff that delivered me. Um the Callie, I know I mentioned her before.
Uh-huh.
Honestly, she was the person that basically got me checked in, did the sonogram. She held my hand when I found out that Callan had died. She actually like was there to get me checked back into the
She
hospital.
was. She was. Oh,
Yeah. And then like she was there I think in the morning and she had to leave for a little bit, but then she came back and helped me deliver.
she did. Oh,
Yeah. And like the other nurses that we worked with were amazing. All that day I had Michaela and Dr. Schwartz. She's the one that she was my OB-GYN that delivered me. And then immediately, like after the nurse that took care of me all through the night was Miranda. Like really amazing. Like honestly, I to this day I like remember their names and I sing their praises and just really appreciate them and love them. And yeah, I had to say that. Like I can't be on this podcast without saying like thank you.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Because they get you through
Yeah.
in a really, really hard time.
Yeah. Like I don't know if they'll ever remember my name. It's okay if they don't. Like, but I'll never forget theirs. Really appreciate them.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Yes. We should always, like to say thank you to all the people that, because it really is, it's not their typical shift either, a lot of times. And that's when they're there to comfort and to hold your hand like that. Holding hands in those times when it is rough, that really means a lot to us moms, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
did Dr. K say anything about maybe what had happened? Was there any sort of I wouldn't say autopsy, but was there, or did you guys have an autopsy done of why he passed away, or was it just because they maybe just contributed it to the CDH?
So we opted not to have an autopsy done.
Mm-hmm.
It was offered, but honestly, like couldn't bear the thought of, you know, slicing my son's chest open. Didn't that just didn't sit well with me.
Mm-hmm.
They did say that um they were like these things just they said that it actually probably wasn't the CDH
Oh,
because CDH is typically like it affects you when you're born
when you're born,
because of
exactly.
your lungs.
Yeah.
And yeah, they said that these things don't these things just happen and they don't actually know what causes stillbirth most of
Yeah.
the I've had I obviously I've had a daughter. I have my daughter Hope.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I've asked these questions again. I've had many conversations. And my OB-GYN with her, my MAFM with her,
Mm-hmm.
seemed to think that it was the CDH. So I don't know. I'm honestly, to me, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't change what happened,
Yeah.
you know? But yeah, no autopsy
Okay.
and no real answers.
Yeah.
Just reassurances. Whether or not I believe them is a different story, but
Mm.
reassurances that it's not my fault.
Yeah. And then did you guys shortly check out of the hospital then
Yeah.
and then fly home?
So we left the hospital I think around like 10 or 11 in the morning. It was pretty early
Mm-hmm. And
and
were you feeling okay?
I was exhausted.
Okay, exhausted, but
Yeah,
like
but
physically okay, you just gave birth to a 6-pound baby. Like,
oh, get this. So like we left the hospital. I remember walking down the stairs out of Bayfront and then walking down the street and our car needed to be repaired. And so we ended up like taking our car to get repaired. And then going to Walgreens to pick up a prescription for me. like it was any other Tuesday. You know, it was the most surreal thing. I fell asleep in the repair waiting room. And then like when we went to get my prescription, this is one to prepare yourself for if you ever go through stillbirth, but oh, well, most people here probably do. Sorry. But I was still swollen.
Yeah.
My belly was still big. So we were like walking around Walgreens trying to get stuff together cuz didn't have a whole lot of I didn't pack much.
Yeah.
You know, when I left the hospital, you know, February 14th, I was fully prepared to come back.
Yes.
Like I thought I was kind of going crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I didn't really bring anything.
Right.
So I was getting things together and, you know, we had a few people ask me like, "Oh, when are you due?" And just being like, "Oh, we just had our baby yesterday." And they're like, "Oh, congratulations." And just like not having the heart to tell them.
Yeah. It's like so awkward when and they're like, when they realize what they've said.
Yeah. And I think like I actually think of the cashier who checked us out that day. I think she kind of caught on. Like and she kind of caught on because instead of saying things like, "Oh, congratulations," she's like, "Hey, these are some tips that you're going to want to do to take care of yourself." And I could just tell on her face like she knew something might be up,
Oh,
you know. It was a little bit of a blessing.
yeah. Wow. That's intuitive of her to pick up on that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so that's another thing that they don't tell you after stillbirth is you still have to like, you know, you still have postpartum.
Yep. You got to take care of things and they don't, yeah, you forget that you have to push out a baby and then you are walking around after having pushed around a baby and like you're bleeding and you're sore and you're groggy and it's all the things, right?
Yeah, it felt like I had a little turtle tail like or turtle head like sticking out down there and walking around being like, "Oh, I can't sit right." Like,
That is the truth.
I mean, like,
So,
and going like anytime you have to go to the bathroom, even just to like pee, it's a
It's
production.
it's an ordeal. Yes, it is a production. You're like, what am I doing? Yeah.
Yeah. But we stuck around Florida for a couple weeks because there's some red tape, you know, some bureaucratic stuff. They have to have people check off on cause of death or that it
Oh,
was stillbirth before we could go home.
okay.
So before we could even have him cremated.
Right. And did you guys have him eventually cremated in Florida and then you were able to bring his ashes home and such? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah. Oh man. You always forget about this, like the check boxes and the certificates that need to be signed and all of those things that all need to be done. Yeah.
yeah. And just communicating with like the professionals and being like, I am the most awkward person on the face of this planet right now. And I'm trying to give myself grace, but it's just not working.
You're like, this is not pretty. This is not good.
Yeah.
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 Yep. Been there.
Yeah.
So you guys were able to, so you hung out there. I'm assuming you guys stayed with Kiefer's aunt, or were just kind of in that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you flew home back to Washington. Is that right?
We actually drove.
You drove.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That is a long trip after having a baby. And oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. We so before I came out, my father-in-law was actually very gracious and he took our cat to my in-laws in Utah and kind of dropped her off and
Okay.
then drove our car out to Florida.
Yes, I guess that makes sense because if you guys were planning on the long haul, like you said, because if you're going to be in the hospital, well, if he was going to be in the NICU for several months, 1 to 3 months, and then you guys were going to be there for surgeries and stuff, it made sense to have a car there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
And
was
so
nice of him to do that.
It was very nice. We were very blessed, like very, very much a blessing. And like honestly, and we just had so many things like that. And Like it means a lot. Like there's really no way that I can repay that.
Yeah.
And just want to say thank you.
I know there's so many people to thank along the way. So you guys drove back to Washington, and did you end up doing any sort of memorial when you guys got home, or a funeral?
So we are still working on that
Okay.
actually. Where I just bought his burial plot this last week.
Uh-huh.
He's gonna be buried in Pony Express Memorial, so not far from where we live.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
And my brother-in-law is making a couple boxes, so there's going to be like a little memo box that we have of him,
Mm-hmm.
and then the box that we're going to bury him in.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess as far as like a memorial goes or burial service, it's just going to be Kiffer, Hope, and I, and just something really private. And then every year we run the Tiny Hero run for CDH.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Wasn't that just recently?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I saw you post about that. I was like, oh, that is perfect. So that's great.
Yeah.
That's a way to honor him too.
Yeah. It was awesome. I love that event so much. I remember the first year we went, it was a very healing moment for me.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming on and telling us about Callan. Like what a rock, you're right. He went through so much in his very short life, and it seems like he is very close to you. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about him and about yeah, just anything that we may have missed and that you want to share with us?
I just want to tell my son that I love him. That's what it comes down to. I love him, and he keeps his promise to me every day. And this isn't a family dynamic that I would have chosen for myself, but I do believe very strongly that he's our family, my daughter, and any other children we may have an extra set of eyes on them. And for that, I can be grateful. I love you, Callan. Thank you for looking out.
That is perfect. I think you're right. He is looking out for you guys.
Thank you.